Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for another Mailbag Coaches Edition. Our guest this time around is Hugh Clarke, who comes on the show for the second time. Hugh is author of the terrific newsletter ThreadOfOrder. It is one of my favorites. I find myself agreeing with his breakdowns all the time, but one thing that I really appreciate about having him on the show is he talks about technique, does a better job of covering it than I do, so we get to take advantage of that and get into the weeds on some technical stuff when it comes to the pro game. On this show, we get into the difference between Tsitsipas and Musetti's backhands, the one-handers, and why Lorenzo's doing a better job of protecting it these days. We talk about the technical changes that Alcaraz has made to his serve and his backhand. We hit on the forehands of Jakub Mensik and Alexander Zverev and Holger Rune, all forehands that are significant in terms of success as they try to push up against the upper echelons of the game. So that and so much more with Hugh Clarke right now. We're joined once again by Hugh Clarke, author of the great newsletter in Substack, ThreadOfOrder, which follows a pretty similar format to Monday Match Analysis. A lot of deep breakdowns of men's finals every week. I love them. Hugh, thanks for coming back on Monday Match Analysis and for a coach's mailbag, quite specifically.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gil. Always a pleasure, and yeah, love the work you do. Like I said last time, I'm always looking forward at comparing notes after a big match and seeing what you saw that was different or what I saw that was different or what we saw the same. And yeah, good to be back.
100%. So before we get into viewer comments, which is going to be the majority of the show, I do have a couple of things that I want to interject on my own. The first being probably like the low-hanging fruit topic of the moment. And part of me hesitates to go here because it might not be relevant. Alcaraz and Sinner would need to win 6 matches each at Wimbledon to meet in the final. Not that any of us doubt that that can happen, but we're just not there yet. I still think it's useful as a thought exercise. When you throw grass into the mix of Sinner versus Alcaraz, what do you think are the big important things that might change?
I think it was interesting. I think they've played once Wimbledon, which is, a while ago now, but Sinner won that in 4 sets, and it looked to me like it was a speed issue of, Sinner hitting too big, returning too quick a lot of the times. Alcaraz maybe not getting as much time on the ball, obviously on grass. I mean, I've always thought Sinner is one of those guys who just looks like he could be great on every surface. Like I always thought that. It's interesting hearing Andre's comments, Agassi's comments lately about how Alcaraz doesn't seem to lose that movement, that little slowdown in movement on the grass compared to other guys. And I can see that being a factor. Honestly, when I look at their head-to-head and their rivalry, it's still so early, and so much of my analysis is like, why is Sinner not hitting his serve numbers? Because if he hits his serve numbers, I think he wins a lot of those matches. And yeah, on grass, I would be right now, even though Alcaraz has won it twice on grass, I'd be leaning Sinner. I think, he was right there at the French. He's made big strides on clay, even though that's a heartbreaking loss. And I was leaning. I know it sounds. It's easy to say in hindsight, but I was leaning Sinner like to a couple of people privately at the French Open. I was thinking he was going to get him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was an unbelievable match. And yeah, right now I would love a rematch on the grass in a couple of weeks, and I would be leaning Sinner. But of course, we have to see what happens in those first 6 matches.
I love that you brought up the Wimbledon match a few years back because I vividly remember the narrative around this particular matchup at that point. And it was very much reversed, where Alcaraz was the better player against the field, but Sinner kept beating him. And the idea was that Carlos looked rushed in this head-to-head. And with the big returns and just the heavy hitting off of the ground, I completely remember it the same way. Not that I've revisited my notes for that match or anything, but yeah, it was totally a time issue. I'm glad you brought up the serve. I wrote down kind of 3 things. Biggest things that might change with the grass. One, the high heavy effectiveness goes away. The kick wide effectiveness goes away. Alcaraz definitely takes advantage of some of the ability to get the ball to bounce up high out of center zone. And that option is sort of taken away, although there are others, like Alcaraz has a nice backhand slice. Um, I I also said Alcaraz is not going to turn as many points around off of hard returns, which was a big thing at Roland Garros. Like, how many returns did Jannik smoke? And Alcaraz was able to kind of dig back into the point. And on grass, when you're on defense right away, you normally just don't get back in it as often. That's the
Can I
second
just say
thing.
on the
Yeah, go
flip side
ahead.
of that, I think what Alcaraz does so well on grass is he does use his chip and his block return to sort of get himself into points, and we saw that against Novak last year. But I think against Sinner, Sinner's +1 is much bigger naturally than Novak. That I think he's going to eat up that slice chip return better than Djokovic would, and then I don't think you can defend that as easily on grass. Just on the flip side of that, but I agree with Alcaraz's serve. He loses a bit because he doesn't have that three-quarter slider second serve yet. Really, like he likes that kick, and that just we saw that get smoked by Djokovic in Australia, and
Yeah,
I think on the hard court we see that a bit get exposed.
absolutely. And then the last one is Sinner's serve has more of an opportunity to be a free point generator on the grass. To your point, that's something that we kind of look for coming into these head to heads, and it hasn't materialized whatsoever in their last five matches
Yeah.
where Alcaraz has served with Jannik or better than Jannik. And this is something that Sinner simply needs to reverse. I mean, people come to you and I, Hugh, and ask us the questions like, what does Jannik need to do? What does he need to adjust? And I think both of us, one of the things that we've been saying a lot is like, he just needs to serve better.
Yeah, it's like it's so simple, but it's so important to winning matches and doing well when you're versing such great returners, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like it's not rocket science. And I think, their recent matches have all been on the slightly slower side. So maybe Sinner's going for bigger serves to try and get the ball through the court, or I think their last truly sort of quick court match was Miami 23 maybe or something, or 24, sorry. And he won
Yeah.
that match. So Sinner won that match. So I think as soon as we see some quicker surfaces, I'm leaning Sinner with the way he plays right now.
All right. I've got one more before we go to the comments. It's a bit of a take. All right, so I'm gonna give you the take. I'll let you digest it. I think that the Jakub Mensik forehand will be the technique storyline of the next 5 years. In other words, in the in terms of the most discussed pivotal strokes in the landscape of men's tennis, I look at Mensik, mega server, literally statistically, only Pechi Perikar and Opelka compare right now, which is so scary to think about when you watch him move around the court. And now you have a rock solid backhand. You do have net rushing, which is something that Zverev and Medvedev, who are kind of the player comps to Mensik, have lacked. And then I get to the forehand, and this is where you can start to poke holes and put it under a microscope and get a little bit uncomfortable about Mensik as a world's beater. So, what do you think of the Mensik forehand? And do you agree with my take that that particular shot is going to be the technical talking point of the next 5 years?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's definitely going to be one of them because, like you said, like the rest of his game is scary. Like the serve is huge, the movement for his size is really, really good. The backhand is really, really good. Like a lot of the younger guys, they seem to be pretty good in the forecourt now. Like we had a generation of guys like Rublev and Fritz who like didn't quite have the transition game when they came on tour, and now like you see like Alcaraz and Rune and even Fonseca can chip forehands. They sort of have like all these intangibles already, and I see with Mensik he can come forward and he's not afraid to come forward. The forehand for me is, the way he drops it. Like I think Korea was calling it a two-piece swing, where he drops it below the ball and then he starts to accelerate. So it's
Yes.
always going to be slower in terms of speed and spin. I do think, like I think you mentioned it, he's pretty good at redirecting it. Like he's pretty cerebral at just guiding it down the line. I still think mechanically it's kind of quiet in the arm. Like it's not like Zverev, which is like super slinky in the wrist. So I can see him managing it better than someone like Zverev, but I just don't know if we've seen a guy in a very long time win majors consistently without a world-class forehand, right? At the end of the day, like fifth set of a major or whatever, when you're getting a little bit tight and you already got a slow forehand swing, that's just getting slower and slower. And, the rest of your game has to do more and more heavy lifting. So I don't know if he figures out a tweak to that and it becomes something better, then I think the tour's got a real problem on their hands. But right now, that's the clear weak point. And, with the number of five setters he's been having in his slams and those losses, like just maybe over a five-set match, players starting to get a read on how to play him a bit. Maybe there's a bit of signal on that. I don't know, but I don't think that's not going to be a major talking point in the next 5 years because he's going to put himself in position deep in majors, I think, with his game as it is, and then it's going to get put under the microscope by the Alcaraz and Sinners of the world.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I got very hot takey, very first take like with that framing. But I my head goes to the same place in terms of the importance of an elite forehand where all of the best players have seemingly had them in the last couple of decades. And for Mensik, it does really feel like that piece is missing. And will the other pieces be enough to kind of make up for it? That said, you talk about the kind of soundness, the loss of power, but the soundness. There are matches where his forehand is not leaky. It's
Mm,
solid. It's going in. It's setting the patterns he wants to set. And the one slam winner in the in recent times who doesn't have the big weapon forehand is Medvedev. But
mm.
in 2021, you don't go at Daniil's forehand and get errors. You
That's
just
right.
you get a brick wall. So Mensik can have that kind of brick wally type forehand potentially, right?
Yeah, and well, the thing with Medvedev too is like the harder you went at it, the better it was to me. And I don't know if Mensik has that quality, but
Yeah.
to me, like Medvedev has one of the great running forehands cross court of the last 10 years. Like he loved hitting that thing flat, hard cross, and then it's like what do you do against that? Because it's hard and low into your forehand. So yeah, I'd say Medvedev for a period there. I don't know if it was underrated. I thought a lot of people underrated it. I thought it was a great forehand at his best because it did exactly what he needed it to do, which is just not miss and keep it deep and flat. And I guess the one time he got exposed was when, because he doesn't generate much spin, when he had some short balls against Nadal in that Oz Open final, and we're at night and it's slow and he just can't put the ball away. I mean, that's ultimately, I guess, what was a big factor of him losing that match is he just didn't have the stopping power when he got a short ball. He would have much preferred Rafa to come at him probably and just let him play from deep positions.
Yeah, Rafa was slicing right up the middle, like low,
Yeah.
short, middle, and it was killing Daniil. And and then I think with the lack of just plus one ease, I think we've started to see it eat away at his physicality in his older age. But we don't need to get into that. Let's get into the comments. Starting with Instagram at Gill Gross underscore. Please do follow. I'm going to start with some responses on my IG story. I don't feel like you're not on Instagram much, are you?
No, not really. No.
Uh,
I get on there like every now and then to check messages, but I'm not. I just get your content on YouTube, Gil, so not enough of Instagram yet.
that's okay. We'll accept it. Okay, this one's from David. This is okay. So, what percent of the tour is one-handed backhands? 8%.
Maybe less than that now. Top 100, I mean, yeah, top 100, maybe seven, eight, yeah, maybe seven or eight guys, yeah. That's actually, you know what, maybe more about 10 now.
10%, you think? Okay.
Yeah.
We can check easily in a second on Tennis Abstract, but let's say it's between 7 and 10%. It's probably 35% of the comments that I get when I have you on and say, hey, like, I don't tell people to ask about technique, but I say, if you have technique questions, this is the moment. Anyway, here's one right off the bat from David. Should new slash young players be convinced not to have a one-handed backhand?
You know, it's funny, like I think uh there's players on tour who could have won slams if the backhand was a little better, like Tsitsipas. I think, and at the same time, Federer won a lot of slams, but it was still the backhand that was the weaker wing. Um, I think I think it depends. Like juniors start playing and they have dreams of going pro, and at the end of the day, you probably want to have a two-hander if you want to maximize your chances of being the best version of yourself. But on another angle, I get a lot of young kids who love to hit one-handers. And that's why they play the sport because they enjoy it. And I don't want to be the one to stop that because at the end of the day, your odds of making it in pro are like 0.00 whatever. So there's that balance I find. And then I also am not convinced you can't still win majors with the one hander. Like team was winning majors a couple and beating the big three consistently with a one hander only 4 or 5 years ago. We forget that. And it wasn't because of everything else. Like his backhand was elite. You know, his slice was elite. His ability to go line and hard with his backhand was elite. This is a guy who beat Rafa multiple times on clay with a one hander. So I just think we haven't seen a great play with a great one hander since team, but I'm bullish on guys like Henry Bernet, the young Swiss guy who won the Australian Open Juniors. I think his backhand it could be a model for how it can adapt in a faster environment. It's lower, but it's still long, and I think I'm looking forward to seeing how his game adapts. Um, Musetti's is kind of compact as well. It's a bit lower, um, but again, like these guys have to always use the slice to get out of trouble and lean on the slice a lot, given the speed of the serve and the speed of the game now. And yeah, I don't know if we'll see a one-hander dominate the game again, but I definitely think we can have one-handers winning slams still. And I definitely think if a junior has a good one-hander, they can become a good pro with a good one-hander.
I like it. Nothing to add on my end. We're going to get to some of these other topics with Musetti and Tsitsipas, I'm sure, a little bit later on. This one's from the tennis fan. What are the key skills to perform on grass? A good serve, return, touch. So let's tackle this one, Hugh. What are the things that start to come into focus for you when you're looking at who's going to have success in the next 2, 3 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, well, first, like the movement is key. Like you got to stay lower and you've got to be careful with your first step, like you can't slide as easily, and you got to sort of take that little follow-up step after a shot before pushing back to center. So, like Agassi said, he was talking about it in the French Open coverage about how Alcaraz doesn't seem to lose too much speed on the natural surfaces. He sort of is still really quick out of the corners on grass.
Yeah.
And then the other one is, swing length. You can't stand too far back on grass to return like a Medvedev or a team because the slice serve and the +1 just hurts you too much. And so if you're unable to stand closer in and hug the baseline more as a baseliner, you're going to get in trouble against big servers and guys coming forwards on you. So, Alcaraz is great at that because he stands up and he can block. And Sinner's naturally quite good at taking big cuts close in. And that's when you see super compact guys like Ugo Humbert, able to just excel on that surface. So I look for compact strokes. Manarino is another good one, for a guy who is never top 10 in the world, but on grass he's trouble. So compact strokes, ability to like push out of the corners pretty well and keep your balance. Obviously, you get rewarded for some variety, some slice coming forwards. Mute, Dan Evans, these guys are going to be more trouble because that ball stays that much lower when you're defending. And you see that with Musetti as well, where his slice on hard court would sit up and have that predictable bounce, which you could attack that much more easily. But on the grass, it's staying that much lower and that much harder to attack. So, yeah, it's definitely a different game still to hard courts, and I like to see that. And that's what comes to mind. And obviously
Yeah.
then first serves as well. Having a great first serve is just going to get you to more breakers and give you more chances.
Yeah, especially with in the precision category.
Mm.
I'd say the things I would add to that, attacking players who are more accuracy oriented and less power oriented, I think can have a moment here because the court gives them that ball speed through the court. So I think Humbert is actually a good example. His ball speeds are not through the roof, but he is one of the most lethal attacking players because he's taking the ball early and putting it in corners and redirecting well. And I think that kind of thing goes a long way. And then the other thing that I think is more significant than speed these days, especially at Wimbledon, where like that grass court is not that fast, especially in the second week. It's not like, Stuttgart. I called Stuttgart last week. That is a quick grass court. I mean,
Yeah.
that's an 85% first serve points won on a consistent basis. But Wimbledon's not like that. I think the height of bounce factor can be underlooked, and I think it's massive. I look at a guy like John Isner, who
Mm.
probably people falsely assumed was good on grass, was his worst surface. Because he needed his forehand up high. He needed his backhand up high. So the big serve didn't matter as much as that. I think for Zverev, that's a factor. The both wings, but especially his backhand, just way better when he gets a little bit of bounce, and he gets a shoulder height above waist level. Really, I would say for Zverev, where he can actually unlock the backhand power and start to build pressure in a point. And then Hurkacz is another guy. Now, results are very good on grass, but I think that and backhand is kind of built for grass. But on the forehand wing, I like it
Mm.
better when the ball's up high. Mensik, I like his forehand better when the ball's up high. Everything else, I love the grass prospects of Mensik, serve, backhand, all that's great. But the height of bounce thing is something that I think shouldn't be de-emphasized.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, especially even with Isner too, like his serve, so much of it was the bounce as well. With Opelka, so much of it is that kick, and Shelton. Yeah, I think I said Shelton is that kick and that action on the ball, and that just gets dampened. And it's like a good point. Like Demon or another one who come to mind of a guy who is on the baseline and hitting flat enough to get a lot of purchase out of that grass, and moving forwards, like maybe one of the most underrated volleys, like so good at the net. Like last year, obviously he was really unlucky to injure himself in that final point against Feast, but he's a guy who,
Yeah.
if he got confident, it is a handful.
Yeah, great call on that. I've got one more. Players who need to hunt forehands in order to be successful. Tough on the grass. That you lose the time, and it's not just the compact strokes that you mentioned, Hugh, right off the top. It's also you lose your runaround time. So I want an even player who is okay accepting backhands, and that's one that I think about when it comes to Ben Shelton, who
Yeah.
has a great serve and a lot of offensive spark. And okay, that's great for grass, but is it going to be okay that Ben needs to hit more backhands? Like, how much will that hurt him compared to Clay, where he actually, it's my one critique of his performance against Alcaraz. I actually think he could have ran around more, but someone who really gets the best out of their game when they're creating as many forehands as possible. So,
Yeah, that's a good point because at the Australian Open, I made the point. Another quick low bouncing surface. So many flat backhand guys were making third round there. Like I was just going down the list, and it was like Mickelson, Giron, and Mensik, and it was just like all these guys who can just redirect flat backhands, Kachanov, who don't have to run around so much, just can do really well on these types of low, quicker, slicker surfaces for sure.
yeah. Okay, here's an interesting one from Sebastian. What's your take on I dominant? True, false, or doesn't really matter?
Yeah,
Did I? And but I think I was reading one of your pieces. It was the Tsitsipas piece, and I think this got in there a little mention of eye dominance, and I think it's a Patrick Mouratoglou thing. He likes to talk about it quite a bit. What's your take on it?
yeah. I have read some literature on it. And my take is it's more like if you're focusing on that, you're way off the fundamentals. Like one, like tracking a ball from a distance is a binocular. Like it requires both eyes to track it. And once you've tracked it and you've read the bounce, your brain can fill in the last few meters. That's why you don't actually watch it onto the strings. And so, and the other thing is, they talk about Federer being what is it? I always get it confused. Left eye dominant. Um, so he like turns. That's why he turns his head on the forehand, but he also turns his head on the backhand. Like some players just seem to turn the head more on both sides. So if you really were dominant with one eye, wouldn't you like watch the ball closely here and then watch it out in front on the other side? Um, Yeah, in my research, it does help in aiming sports like shooting and archery, where you close one eye and you use your dominant eye to aim. But in tracking sports with a moving object, you track the ball with both eyes because you need that for depth perception, and then you aim your shot with your body positions. Like, so maybe eye dominance helps you turn your shoulders more, which then maybe can make hitting both ways a little easier, but it's not because of the eye dominance, it's because you're turning your shoulders more. That's kind of my take on it at the moment. I have a draft on eye dominance. I have a lot of drafts, but yeah, that's my take.
I
I
have
have
no
more drafts than
drafts.
posted pieces.
Hugh, I have no drafts. That's the good thing about the benefit of podcasting. You don't draft. I have
Yeah.
nothing to add on that. This is one of those comments where if you weren't with me, I would skip it. I'd be like, I don't know. So there you go. Thanks for taking that one on.
I will say, can I mention though, so a really good resource is tennisplayer.net, and they've had articles on eye dominance where they get researchers from both sides of the perspective, like eye dominant researchers who say yes, it helps, in baseball, which is a depth perception sport, and then some that have no. So if you wanted a really good article on eye dominance, tennisplayer.net has some on that. Yep.
Okay, excellent. Here's one from Ronnie. Zverev's long charging windup on the forehand enables huge power and accuracy. If rushed, it breaks. So, okay, might as well get into this topic, especially because I did a video on Monday about Sasha's forehand, the idea of the technique limiting the ability for Zverev to play up in the court, but in my opinion, not limiting his ability to achieve ball quality. For me, it's the pressure and the tightness, the nervousness in big situations that end up hurting the ball quality. Where do you stand on this? Is Zverev's technique prohibitive for aggressive tennis or for certain court positions? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I do. Like one of my first articles was talking about how players now seem to flex the wrist more, um, and set up on the side more. So in my view, compared to like the Del Potro, Federer, Djokovic style, there was more moving parts. And originally I thought, okay, maybe they're getting more speed by having this snappy wrist motion. But I'm writing a new forehand article where I contend that the Zverev style of forehand has more moving parts, but also produces less racket speed because when you flex the wrist, you actually lose a bit of that um, upward tilt of the racket head, which when you flip it is going to be a weaker flip. So I'm of the opinion that, and I've said this before, Zverev's forehand is like an engine, like a less powerful engine with the bolts half screwed in as well. Like it's not as powerful and it's going to break more easily compared to like a Sinner Djokovic style forehand. Um, I do think when you have those moving parts and it's a slower forehand, you have a much easier time hitting it when the ball's dropping, not when the ball's rising or when the ball's coming through quick. So, you know, he probably plays from deep positions because he likes to hit on the way down. When it's coming on the way down, he has time to read the bounce and time the ball more easily, and then feels confident to accelerate. Like you said, he can produce pretty good ball speed. He's 6'6", he's a great athlete. But yeah, I don't see him able to. Um, I don't think it's a particularly long forehand, by the way, either. Like I don't think the take back is like the elbow gets kind of high and the forehand is to the side, but it's not Arthur Fils size, and I think
Agreed.
he is a guy who can sort of still play up in the court a bit better. So anyway, I'm writing an article that touches on that stuff more, but the long and short of it is there's a lot of moving parts to his forehand. He's got long levers and he's still not producing as much speed given all that.
Did you call it a flexed wrist take back?
Flex wrist is when, yeah, when you like sort of bring your palm to your forearm. Yeah.
So like the Tommy Paul, the Karen Hachinov, maybe Tiafo in there.
Tiafo, Tiafo, Musetti a bit. You see it more with extreme grips because extreme grips naturally on contact won't be as extended. So it makes sense when you've got a Fritz super extreme grip. But Zverev and Paul, these guys are like somewhere on semi-Western. And so on contact, they're
Yeah.
actually going to be extended, right? Or more extended. So that's where I'm like, you've got unnecessary moving parts in this little hinge.
And it's not the best list. It's not atrocious. Like, I mean, there are positive attributes certainly to like Tiafoe's forehand, but it's not the best list that we just rattled off.
Yeah, yeah. Her cat she could throw in there.
Yeah. Last one from Instagram. This is from Lucas. We're gonna stay on forehands, I guess. Rune's forehand. I've never loved watching the technique. So can you discuss it? So I'm excited to talk about Holger's forehand. I'm glad somebody asked because I have found it to be again somewhat limiting for Holger when comparing him and stacking him up with some of his peers. And there's a certain disconnectedness that I sometimes see in it. What do you make of that
Yeah.
word?
I touched on it at the Australian Open. So originally when he first came on tour, I loved it because he had that wrist extension, the upright racket head, um, gravity mechanics. But having seen him more and more now, I almost feel like he's too compact with his setup where the arm is a long way from the body, so like the arm is almost quite straight. Like he hits a straight arm forehand, but in his
Yeah.
setup, it's like his arm is already quite straight. It's like not very bent. And given how low he sets up, I find when he is not half volleying the ball, where as long as you just touch it, you're going to get good speed, or if he doesn't have time to set up, sometimes he gets like a rally ball and he seems to almost like mistime it and just like sort of fizzles into the core. Like there's not much speed to that shot. And so like I almost feel like with him it's intention. Like if his intention is to hit really big on a point, which he often has premeditated, it can look great. Like he's half volleying and
Yeah.
he's swinging big and it's like, wow, he can half volley like winners off his toes like Federer. But when he's in big points and he's trying to rally, I feel like his rally ball, his 75% rally ball forehand, it's almost like he's guiding it and there's no actual speed or say like Sinner's rally ball, he's still swinging massive and just having a lot of racket speed and a lot of RPM. Whereas Rune, because it's almost so compact with how low it is and how straight the arm is, I think it comes across as stiff. Like if you straighten your arms and start to swing, you're going to look stiff, right? There's not a lot of fluidity there. So I wrote about it in one of those Australian Open pieces where I gave you some visuals if that person wanted to check it out. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would say he needs to take it back higher or bend the elbow at the start a little more to create a little bit more length and fluid speed into that shot.
I totally agree with you about the rally ball speed and how sometimes it just feels too slow and too attackable when he's trying to be consistent on it. Then when he's trying to inject, I think it gets really, really flat. And I I don't love the reliability of it when he's going. I'm in aggressive mode, and we both I think want to see better decisions and choices based on incoming ball, or at least more consistent and programmed choices based on incoming ball. But he does have one of those 0 or 100 forehands where the 80% is just so valuable in a point in point out. But for me, it feels like there's like a slow spinny one or a fast flat one, and you want a fast spinny one so you can get that high margin aggression, shot after shot after shot.
For sure. And, I've also said before, like sometimes if you want to swing slow on a forehand, it helps to be with an Eastern forehand because you can swing through the line of the ball more easily, right? But he's not Eastern, he's semi-Western. So anytime you get a little more extreme, you need that racket speed to really produce that ball, right? And if he's not fully set with his legs and he's not stepping in, he doesn't have just that arm speed and that arm fluidity to like arm the ball when you're out of position sometimes. But yeah, I agree. Like sometimes the 100 forehands are amazing, like on the run and on returns and like off his toes, he can just hit absolute missiles. And then sometimes he can lock down on clay and sort of just make that thing and redirect high line. But that 80% ball is so important to his game style because I also think he needs to have a bit of a counterpunching Djokovic core to him as a player and then have all that flourish to supplement it versus he tries to be like more of an Alcaraz flourish player and not enough of meat and potatoes.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I've heard him in press reference Bear C 2022, and I just feel like he's always trying to, like, in his head, the best version of himself is that serve plus one monster who is, by the way, hitting second serves 110 miles per hour. Remember that? He was just out of his mind, but he was indoors, which helps. It aids that kind of redlining. But for me, that's in his head the ideal Holger Rune, and I don't know if it's the most achievable Holger Rune or the healthiest kind of goal for him to set for his game. Did you see what he said about we got comments about this as well. He beat Mackie McDonald in Queens, and he said he adjusted his grip on the serve, and people are talking about that and they want to know our take, but he was a little bit coy about it. He didn't say that he moved his grip over. He didn't say he moved it right or moved it left or he changed the bevel. So I'm not clear on that. I think he may have moved it down or maybe literally loosened his grip. He didn't
Mm.
specify. So I guess we can speculate for a moment. It's very unconventional for a player to be like, yeah, I changed my grip on the serve. What do you suspect he may have done?
Yeah, I honestly have no suspicions at all. I mean, like, because his grip, I've looked at it, is fine, and um, I hadn't even watched the Mackie McDonald highlights yet, so I haven't even seen the match. But I have no idea what he means by that. If it's like, yeah, could he be choking up on the grip or going further down or loosening it? I wouldn't think he would change which bevel or slightly which way he
Me
goes,
either.
but maybe he changed it a tiny bit. Who knows? I don't know. That's a great question though to ask him if he could like elaborate on that because I would be fascinated.
They tried. They asked to follow up, and he didn't want to say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which I've noticed Holger will do this. Like he loves to say like he loves to give you a little bit of some technical stuff, and then he won't really tell you what it is. And it's the same thing with the Djokovic Olympics thing, where he kind of was like, "Yeah, I copied Djokovic in the Olympics," and then it's like, "Wait, what does that mean?"
Yeah.
Um, uh, okay, yeah, I think we can move on. He said it's nothing significant. I'm quoting him now. Quote, it's nothing significant, just that we made a minor adjustment during the preseason to see how it worked during training sessions. In that first set, I got broken twice, so it was evident that I had to wake up, had to change something. I started thinking about the solution, quickly started communicating with my coach. Although he didn't suggest I change the grip, in the end, I did it anyway. So, an interesting one.
I don't know. That is
Yeah.
interesting, but I have no idea right now.
Okay, let's go to what's this? Swervebot on Twitter. Good username. For the clay season, Carlos worked with both his new and old styles of backhand, and it proved quite effective. Do you think it'll be like that for grass and hardcourt going forward? Also, now that we have a decent sample size on his new serve, how hopeful should we be for the hardcourt season? So let's go one by one. There were a lot of comments about Alcaraz's technical changes, both on the backhand and the serve. Let's start with the backhand, which I think held up extremely well all throughout clay court season, not only making balls at a higher rate. I don't have data on this, but I just felt it was more consistent than it's ever been. Also, the variety, really leaning into modulating spins on the backhand, and you just never got the same thing. Sometimes it was higher and spinnier, and then the flat aggressive was still there when he wanted to mix that in.
Yeah. Backhand clay season was, yeah, maybe the best we've seen it in terms of, like you said, like his ability to still inject pace, his ability against Sinner to flight that thing up higher. I saw this comment yesterday when you launched the mailbag, and so then I went back and I watched Alcaraz at the Australian Open end of last year, clay season, first match against Adam Walton yesterday or the day before, and his backhand for clay season was closer to his or was a hybrid of what we saw in Australia. What we saw in Australia was very straight arms, very low power position. Like the racket head, it was almost at the same level as the hands. And I was very critical of that back. And I was like, there's no, how are you generating balls? Like, I know you're twitchy and you're like an incredible athlete, but there's no easy power here. Like you're muscling it. And then on the clay, we get a higher power position with the racket head and we get a slightly more bent arm. And maybe I'll actually write a post about this today or tomorrow and just show you how what we saw with the old Alcaraz was a super high power position where the racket head is at head height or higher. What we saw in Australia against Djokovic was Nori Kyrgios-esque, where that racket head is super low and the arms are super straight. And what we saw on the clay was like in between. And I was really, yeah, very sort of impressed with it. And I think it works because he's getting more easy racket speed with a little bit of the drop and a little bit of that left elbow extension. So yeah, it's not the same backhand we saw in Australia.
Yeah,
And
so
I'll write about that.
I love that. I think that's so good. So the orientation of the racket head on the take back is what you're referring to. So power position, you're talking about the setup and
Yeah, I'm talking
the
about the racket head getting above the hand so that when you swing, the
right.
racket drops and that sort of gives you a bit of momentum and power. He had virtually none of that in Australia and in parts of even Rotterdam, I think. And it wasn't until the clay, because I went back and I started looking at highlights throughout the start of this year. And maybe it's a surface thing, but against Adam Walton, again, I was seeing that much higher power position. I don't know if that's slowly gonna, because sometimes the conditions just unconsciously make these guys adapt the swings a bit. Maybe on the faster stuff, it'll get slightly lower, and then on the bouncier stuff, it'll get slightly more bent. But against Adam Walton, it was like his backhand on the clay, bit more, bit higher.
But do you think that the hands are lower than it used to be? So
For sure, for sure.
and that part I really like. I just feel
Yeah,
like there's a certain compactness that he achieves from keeping his hands a little bit lower than he used to, that when I'm watching the backhand, it makes me trust it a little bit more. But at the same time, I also agree with you about the Australian Open backhand that seemed almost like the kind of setup that you'd get from one of the more bunty redirecty forehands, which is obviously
yes,
not what he wants to do and not how he wants to hit
yes.
it. And then it felt a little bit forced.
It was almost like he had only his wrists to use in Australia. But I agree, like his lower take back, because guys, the play on him is to attack in those first four shots. So I think he needs to create as much time on his backhand and his forehand as he can, and getting the hands lower at ball level is going to facilitate that. But he's kind of got this happy medium now where the hands are lower, like the arm. It's not like it was closer to like a Zverev take back when he was 2022,
Yes.
2023, or a Djokovic take back. Now it's like Sinner-esque in that the hands go low, but like, more than Sinner, he gets the racket head up still. So he's still getting easier racket speed now than Australia. And yeah, anyone who's interested, just go watch the Australian Open match against Djokovic, then go watch anything for the last few months. It's completely different. And also distinct from his 23 old style backhand as well.
Yeah. Serve, he smoothed it out in the offseason, got rid of the pause in his motion. Now has again it's been a little bit fluid. Not I don't mean this the technique. I mean the changes throughout the year. It doesn't look like exactly the same serve that he started with even. But in general, I've always just been a big fan of the added fluidity and the I guess the adjustments that Alcaraz has made in his trophy position, if that's what you want to call it. And it looks more elastic to me. The rhythm looks better to me. Do you feel like the gains on his serve are visible right now?
Um, Well, yeah, I like the changes he's making because, like you said, it's moving towards something more fluid, something more simple. His older motion, he used to have like the racket and the whole arm was almost straight going out to the right. And then so very late he would like take it all the way back behind him and get that elbow back, which is what you want. Um, but now it's kind of like instead of the racket tip going up and like out to the right, it's more like Sampras, Djokovic-esque, where and in Australia is more pronounced, and maybe he lost a bit of that over the year, but it's moving in towards that more fluid one piece, no stopping motion over the back with the elbow already back in that position. He was kind of, there's a great video actually from Intuitive Tennis on this. He would do a much better job than I can do on the fly here now,
Yeah.
explaining how his elbow with the new motion gets into that nice deep position because if you're wanting to swing up to the right with the serve, you want your elbow going back to the left so it has space to accelerate the racket head through. And so now with his motion, he's getting there earlier. It's more fluid. So I think maybe there's still a little kink in it at the top, like there's like a hint of that old pause he used to have, but I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years we see like a very fluid Djokovic style evolution of his backswing and his serve. And the biggest thing for me with his serve is I think his identity as a server needs to just sort of get a little better. Like I've always been I think you have too, critical of his ability to hit spots or not hit spots. Like
Yeah.
sometimes he's going for wide serves at pedestrian speeds, we'll say, like 120, 125, whatever, not like Shelton speeds. And Djokovic and Sinner are just going to eat that up. And we saw that in Australia a few times. And he's got to just get better at being a spot server and pitching like the ball game with different spins and variation, because when he can get the plus one, even kind of on his terms, that's when he's at his best. But if guys are just taking big cuts on his serve because the spots aren't hit and he's just sort of one speeding that thing, that's when I think he gets hurt a lot, especially on hard courts and things like that. But yeah, I'm a fan of the changes overall.
Me too. Okay, from Double Fault. Would love a comparison between Musetti and Tsitsipas, especially on the backhand wing and on backhand return. Steph's slice, I've always thought, is very average for a one-hander because he hits the ball too far in front of his body. Lorenzo, on the other hand, has an excellent slice to complement his one-hander. Lorenzo also has less time. Wait. Oh, Lorenzo also, when he has less time, hits his one-hander with the top of his racket prepped to the side to shorten his swing path, similar to Sinner's backhand change, instead up towards the sky like Stefanos. As a single-hander myself, it's just some of the little things I've noticed. Would love to hear your thoughts. So I got to plug your Tsitsipas backhand piece. It's terrific. Broke it down incredibly well. Musetti does get a mention later towards that piece, but I'll give you the floor on this one. Differences between Tsitsipas and Musetti's backhand and why Lorenzo at this point in time is able to protect it a whole lot better.
Yeah, before we even get into the technique, Musetti is so much better at defending his backhand because he stands a lot deeper, so he buys himself more time as a returner. His ability to chip is way, way better. Like he's one of the best slicers and best chippers. But technically speaking, his backhand, like that commenter mentioned, he doesn't get as high with the hands and the elbows and the racket head like Tsitsipas does. He keeps things a little lower and like that racket is like sort of dampened down in that power position. When I say power position, like the racket is not as high above the hand at such an extreme angle. Um, but he also has a more extreme grip, which I think makes it. I'm a fan of more extreme backhand grips these days, just because of the high contact points. And that's the main reason. I think you just have a more stable wrist in that position as well. But Tsitsipas's biggest flaw, I think, is that he gets the left arm and elbow very high, but the right arm and elbow very low. And in the piece I wrote, you can see about with all the great backhands, Curtin, Federer, Gaudio, Team, Wawrinka, whatever, you tend to pair the hands and the elbows. If their left elbow gets high and out, then the right elbow or arm will get high and out. If the right elbow is tucked into the body and the hands close, the left elbow gets tucked in and hands are close. Tsitsipas kind of has the high left elbow, but his right arm and hand is so low. And so his swing is not in to out. Like he's not swinging from inside to out to get that easy access to speed and power. He's almost swinging out to in and creating a slice swing and and it creates a very short motion. So it's like a short out to in motion. So it's like he's struggling to produce control or speed. And Tennis Viz gave me some data on that with all the one-handers, and he was like the number one guy at giving opponents high short balls in the middle of the court. Out of the 10 one-handers or whatever they analyzed for me, he was like one or two at hitting a lot of backhands down the middle, hitting a lot of backhands high, and hitting a lot of backhands short. And that's not where you want to be ranking highly if you want to protect your backhand side. So yeah, from a topspin perspective, I think the easiest. Oh, also, he hits a lot of neutral stance backhands, where
Yeah.
his feet are almost down the court versus a lot of one-handers, which helps turn the shoulders and create a more natural and out swing. They produce more closed stances, and Mercedes no different. Like he's much better at producing closed stances. Where if you watch Steph, he's very neutral all the time, almost stepping towards his opponent.
I've
So
never
all in all,
understood
I
that
think
one.
it makes it really strange. Like when you watch him, it just looks off, and check out the feet and the lack of into-out path with the racket.
He'll do it on the slice too sometimes. Like his
Yeah,
stance will be neutral on a slice backhand. And that, again, I think you're so right. When you're watching that visually, you double take. You're like, what? Something look weird about that. Then you realize it's like players don't really hit neutral or open stance slice because they're looking for that extra coil so that they can bring their shoulders around, right? And
yeah.
there's nowhere to go with that shot. What do you make of the contact point thing though that the commenter mentioned? The
With the
contact point of the
slice,
backhand slice. Does
yeah,
Tsitsipas not let it travel deep enough in the zone?
yeah. I think yes, but I don't know if it's chicken and egg. Like if you watch Tsitsipas's racket orientation, his strings are facing up to the sky. And if you sort of watch a lot of the other great slicers, they tend to sort of have the strings facing back on the crown of the head. They've sort of extended that wrist a little bit more. And that facilitates late contact, right? Like if you were to like put a racket in your hand and then see where contact naturally should occur, it facilitates letting the ball come to you, letting you lean on that ball to hit the back of the ball more effectively. And the way Steph sets up with his strings, it almost is like, well, is that why he makes contact in front? Because if he was to make contact late, he would hit the ball into the net. So it's chicken and egg, whether it's like he needs to think about letting the ball come deeper into his slot or into his strike zone, so then he'll maybe adjust his hand naturally. Or if he adjusted his hand, would he then naturally let the ball come deeper into his strike zone? So the way he sets up for his slice, he's very low. His swing is very short. Most great slicers get higher elbows and a longer racket path to produce. Like you still want great racket speed on the great slicers have great racket speed, and they have great extension, so they can play that thing late and they can, get the back of the ball on high balls and wide balls. And so, yeah, his slice technically is also a bit of a mess. And like you say, like doesn't hit at closed stance as much, but it's hard to know where the swing influences the stance or does the stance influence the swing. You'd have to sort of talk to him about it. But yeah,
Absolutely. Slice effectiveness. So this is something that I've talked about a lot, and you mentioned it in your piece. There's a lot of fascination in Musetti's surface preferences and why he's good on clay and grass, and then hard court is where he struggles a bit. You even talked about the slice earlier in this show not being as effective on hard court. On clay, Musetti with the deeper position and the higher balls, he buys himself extra time to produce that drive one-hander. On grass, the slice gets so much more effective. So in terms of hiding the one-hander, and Musetti doesn't have the best drive backhand in the world. It's better
mm,
than Tsitsipas's, but it's not why he wins at the highest level. So in terms of hiding the backhand as a weakness, clay facilitates it, grass facilitates it, hard court does not.
yeah, for sure.
Here's one from Andrew. What do you guys think about Sinner's arm not being straight when hitting his forehand compared to Alcaraz, Federer, and Nadal, etc.? This is one of the most common technical conversations that people have is just straight arm forehand versus bent arm forehand. And I mean, where I've always landed on is you can compile a very long list of great bent arm forehands.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, Sampras, Fonseca is going to be one. I would bet. Sinner, Agassi, Djokovic,
Team.
uh, team. Yeah. I mean, there's so many. I've always thought the straight arm you tend to see more in more conservative grips, more Eastern guys. Dimitrov, Federer, Delpo, they're more Eastern. But again, like Sampras was Eastern, he's bent. It's just a preference. It's just a stylistic preference. I mean, I maybe always wondered because the straight arm you hit it a little further in front, does that help for inside in and taking the angles a little better? And then does the bent arm help you adjust your contact point? So is it better for returning? I've always thought sometimes Rune, because he hits a straight arm, sometimes if you body serve him, he's then forced to swing out to in and side spin his forehand return. And I've always thought body forehand on Rune is a great serve tactic because he can't keep the arm bent and just swing back from behind the ball.
Mm.
And I think most returners tend to be a little more bent arm. Like even Federer, he's one of those guys who's called a straight arm forehand, but you can find a million shots where he's hit a bent arm forehand. So, there's variations. But yeah, I tend to think returning bent arm might have a slight edge, producing angles and power and inside in, inside out, maybe straight arm. But like you said, you can find elite, greatest of all time forehands in both categories. And yeah, that's all I got to say.
Tough to serve forehand hip on Djokovic. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
how good is he at kind of sliding out of the way and getting a lot on
He can
that
bend the
forehand?
arm more, and yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
right out of that pocket. Even if he looks a little jammed, he can make it work. Uh,
Yeah.
from Anurag, we talk a lot about GOAT players, but who do you think should be in the debate for greatest coaches of all time? How do you even evaluate a coach? With players, there are stats and titles, but with coaches, how do you attribute a player's success to them and not just the greatness of the player? This is a hard one to rapid fire, but it's an amazing comment. Coaching discourse in pro tennis is fascinating because it's very messy and it's a lot tougher to do compared to the team sports.
Yeah. And the comment is right. Like, how do you discern how much the coach has had an influence and how much is just sometimes picking the right player to coach? Like Magnus Norman did a great job with Wawrinka, but he had a great player in Wawrinka. So there's no right answer.
He
I
moved him
think
up a level though.
for sure. And that's where it's like you can have a track record like Darren Cahill where he took Hewitt from a junior to a top player, and then he took Agassi in his 30s, and Sinner from outside 10, with Vagnozzi inside 10 and Halep. And so, I did a master's in sports psychology and I researched serial winning coaches. And one of the criteria was, have they won over time with multiple players and like both genders and like different levels? And so, in that instance, maybe Cahill gets a nod because he's done that, but you can't really get a final answer or put a number on how much they help. At the end of the day, at the pro level, a coach is making very minor detailed tweaks to a player often, but oftentimes it's the details that matter. So how do you weigh that up? Um, Ask the players, I guess. I mean, I'm sure the players would be like, I couldn't have done it without so and so. And if that's the case, like and again, like doesn't mean it's a fact, but it's something to get the player's opinion on it, I think.
Cahill really does stand out though. And also one thing to look at is how long do these coaches stay unemployed? And
Mm,
for Cahill, I think throughout his coaching career, he's always been in such demand from top players. As soon as he hits the market, somebody's grabbing him, and not just somebody, but usually a really, somebody who's either about to contend for slams or is already contending for slams. I think that speaks volumes, and there hasn't been a ton of repeatability the way Cahill has had it over a long period of time.
yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
It's hard to find. Yeah.
Oh, Vim Fissette on the women's side has really started to develop a pretty insane resume. He's another one of
Yep.
those guys. As soon as he's available, somebody at the top of the game is going to grab him. Um,
I have to say though, on that
yeah,
point, sometimes that is a strategic point of a player because if we're rivals and your coach leaves, I get you, so then I know how to play Gill. So sometimes that can play a motivation in top players or coaches getting this carousel of other top players. It's like you get
yeah.
the inside edge of a rival. That's a factor to consider, but it's not everything. I think Agassi maybe got Cahill to help him figure out Hewitt a bit.
You think? I think a bigger
I think he might have
factor.
said that recently. I think I've heard
Okay,
that from him.
that's interesting. I mean, to me, I understand why it would be a little bit different if there's a formal relationship and there's money exchanging hands, but um, yeah, I guess you would kind of need to really fully bring somebody on board in order to get them to spill some of those real secrets there. But I also think for a lot of players, they there are some trust issues. I don't mean to be negative about it, but when you bring in a coach, you need to be able to trust that coach. And I think the more compelling their resume becomes, the easier it is to buy into what they are telling you. And I always say
For
like
sure.
coaching is like a diet. the best coaches, the best coaching player relationships are the one where the player has bought in. And it doesn't matter if the advice is good. If there's doubt on the player's side about how good the advice is, it's just not even going to work. It's just a
for sure.
non-starter. From Gerald, strokes aside, any thoughts on movement techniques these days? Is it still possible now to be elite without sliding? I really enjoyed Hugh's trilogy of movement pieces on the big three. He mentioned Alcaraz's north-south movements as a standout. What about Sinner's? Anything unique? Well, let's do the sliding thing. Can you be elite without sliding?
I mean, you can. I think it's you're not going to see it much now because it's literally taught now, even in like 10, 11-year-olds you in fitness and stuff. We teach how to slide on hard court now, getting that front leg outside the center of mass, and it's becoming more of a fundamental if you want to be an elite mover. Murray was a great mover and didn't slide. He made up for it with his anticipation and like just end range brilliance and stuff like that. But would he have been even better if he could slide? I think so. Um, and the way you're seeing Alcaraz and Sinner defend, if that's the benchmark, I don't know how you keep up with that if you don't slide. Now, can you be a great player without sliding? Yeah, if you're offensively just wait, if you are serving out of the trees and then you're just Delpo off both wings or Safin or whatever, maybe you don't need to slide. But if you want to be the best mover, I think you need to slide now.
I agree. You can get really far without it. Medvedev, great defense, doesn't
Yeah,
slide. But more and more, it's going to be something to look for and to train. And it also, to me, suggests at times potentially an athletic limitation if you can't slide.
yeah,
So to me, like the super athletes of the sport are just naturally going to be pretty good at it.
yeah, agreed.
From Mateo, who in the ATP do you think has the most textbook slash imitatable technique for amateurs? I'm going to say you can't say Djokovic.
Oh, okay. I've always liked Sebastian Korda. He's quite simple. I like the lock wrist backhand. The forehand is, nothing is crazy about it. It's like very repeatable.
Why do you think he misses as many forehands as he does?
I don't know. Honestly, I love his forehand. I don't. That's a really, really good question. And that just comes back to like I write about technique, but I write about technique as being like this, the final 1%, like the movement, the mentality, the tactics. That's all bigger. I write about it from like okay, once you're in the top 10, this is where it can really make a difference. But um, yeah, I love Korda's technique. I don't know why he misses forehands. It ruins my thesis a bit.
Well, no, but I'm so with you, and I think
Yeah,
a lot of people who can't even put their finger on it are like when they see Korda play well, they're like, "Oh my God,
yeah.
this guy's so awesome. He's so good. He's gonna be top 10."
I
But
think with him, like you talk about with Rune, like there's not
yeah,
something standout. Like there's not a massive serve, there's not a massive backhand, there's not a massive forehand, there's not elite athleticism. Sometimes I feel like he's not even like an elite competitor compared to the other top guys. So everything is like good on paper, but sometimes it's better to have like that one standout strength, that rock you can just lean on and create your identity around. And yeah, but some days he looks amazing on hard courts, changing direction, both sides, taking it early, so clean, so simple. And then yeah, some days he's just leaking on that side.
yeah, I think the athletic profile and the quickness of his feet, and then sometimes how much his targets shrink, and the mentality. I think all of that sort of gets in the way of what is. Yeah, I love his technique off the ground. I think it looks watching him dictate from the back when he's on is a thing of beauty.
He makes it look easy. Yeah.
What about Iga's serve? Let's take one on that. I'm not going to read the whole comment. Uh, Hi, why is Iga's serve still so weak? It's clear she knows it's a weakness and is trying to fix it, but against redlining aggressive returners, it is still getting obliterated, which is the cause of many of her losses.
Yeah. Similar, not similar to Alcaraz, but with Iga, similar to Rafa actually, when they take the racket up, like they get really high elbow separation, but they don't get the elbow back behind. They don't break the plane with their elbow. And so if I'm serving this way, the elbow is just going like this. It's not very far back, like for the people on YouTube or video. They're not creating like that baseball pitch, great coil with the elbow. So she's trying to produce speed in a smaller range of motion, therefore she produces less speed. Um,
Mm.
and especially in the women's game, like with the way they attack second serves, you know, it would help if you could go bigger on serve, I guess, to neutralize that. But Rafa had that as well. He didn't get great coil with his arms or elbows. Um, and maybe that was a factor in him not, I don't know, really, or maybe, he's spoken about it being tactical why he didn't serve big, but I've always wondered why he didn't maybe make those changes in his serve. But yeah, Rafa's a bit similar in that they didn't get great coil with the arms.
Yeah, although Rafa would locate a slice serve
Sure.
and put it in the right spot, and Iga is kind of the other way. I think if she wants to hit a hard serve, like I don't think she's got issues on the radar gun. Her first
No.
serve can hit 112 and 113, which is fine on the women's tour. But she's gonna be playing Ostapenko, and she'll miss into Yelena's forehand slot, and then it's over.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But again, like if you're trying to produce speed off a smaller motion, like it's more effortful and you're not as loose, and maybe that affects your ability to hit spots as well. Like we tend to see spot servers like Djokovic and Sampras be incredibly fluid because it's just easy to hit that 95% ball speed, and focus on the
Absolutely,
accuracy. Yeah.
absolutely. Uh, you're not muscling at it as much. Two more. From Nathan. So often I hear the negatives about long swings or any ground stroke with a big take back. What are some of the advantages or any positives to having a longer swing? I'm glad this was asked because, wow, I mean, we just talked about it actually with the serve. Serve's a little bit different. You don't need
Yeah.
to time the ball coming at you. But I think you're about to tell us that there are a lot of positives to having a longer swing and that you can be
For
too
su-
short.
for sure. I mean, I always like to say there's no solutions, there's always trade-offs. So when you take a longer swing, the downside is you need more time to prepare, right? And so you're going to be able to be rushed. But the upside is you can produce more power. You can get a deeper slot position, so you often can get more spin. Often it's like a smoother transition, like the racket's accelerating more smoothly, not so violently. So maybe timing is easier. So we've seen a lot of long swings. Like I think Gasquet is probably the best example, one of the longest, most fluid backhands, and still like hits a lot of winners and makes it work with his game by playing from deeper positions. Arthur Fils' forehand, long swing. It's not a weakness. It's a massive, massive weapon. I, especially with juniors, I don't teach juniors to swing compact because I want them to develop weapons, and you develop weapons when you're weaker by having longer swings. This is why WTA players have longer swings as well because they're not as strong in the arms, right? I think what gets a lot of players in trouble is when they get too compact, like a Tsitsipas backhand or I'm blanking on some others, but that's I think when you can get a lack of into out path, a lack of speed that when you get tight just snowballs into shots that just hit the net and we've never I've never seen a pro player go from a short swing to then lengthen the swing, but we've got a lot of examples of players coming on tour with long swings and finding ways to shorten them, like Team, Federer's forehand, Djokovic's forehand, where they come on with weapons because the swings are big, and then the speed of the tour allows them to shorten it but still maintain that sort of identity and weapon in it. Fritz got smaller with his swing. Like so many guys shorten the swings on tour. But you don't really see a Manarino then reverse engineer a feast forehand, So I'm a big proponent of still teaching bigger swings in juniors.
I like the visual there of imagining lefty Manarino just swinging out of his shoes.
Yeah, with
That
his
that
15-pound frame.
yeah, he might need to adjust the equipment there, but hey, he doesn't need to change the racket. He can keep the pure arrow.
Yeah.
That was a great answer. Last one. This is one that people ask this all the time. It's from member a different Roman. How much does muscle mass in biceps, forearm, shoulder, core, legs influence ball speed, if at all? So this is a fascinating topic of conversation in all circles when it comes to tennis technique. How far are your big muscles going in producing power?
I mean, a long way, right? Because like you need the muscles, but more is not better, right? Like as soon as you start losing flexibility and range of motion, uh, like it's like Rafa was a big player, right? And he could hit the ball big. But you run into sort of more stress on your joints, more injuries. You got to carry that weight around. You know, when your bicep get bigger, you have more muscles, but you got to move that extra weight as well with the arm. So when we're talking about producing power, you want to probably have really strong legs and quads and glutes and core, but the arm itself is, it's the transfer of power. It's not really the generator of power. Maybe at end range, you need that wrist strength and the arm strength on the running forehand with like a Nadal. But when your legs are set, it's the legs and the how efficient do you transfer energy from your legs into your core and then into the arm and the racket. And so that's why the Sinners of the world hit massive and the Fonsecas of the world hit massive because the whole chain and the racket is in such good sync that it's like the rubber band phenomenon just perfected. It's not more muscle is going to make them hit even harder. They'll probably lose a bit of flexibility and timing between their joints. So yeah, there is a correlation between muscle size and power output and then shot output, but up to a point. You probably don't want to go any more than what Alcaraz already is in these guys.
Yeah. And they even talked about that after Alcaraz bulked up that one off season, and everyone was like, "Oh, wow, he's got muscles on muscles suddenly." His team said, "We're done. We're done building muscle. We like the weight he's at. We're stopping here."
Yeah,
So, yeah, there's definitely an ideal, and you don't want to lose elasticity, certainly. The fascination in this comes from the fact that Novak can be wiry and still have big weapons off of his forehand, particularly the last few years. Sinner,
yep,
Sinner can be wiry and hit the ball absolutely massive. I will say some of the longer lever guys tend to get away with the thinner frame, where I think
yeah.
the Feast height, Alcaraz height, Ferrer, uh, you get
Agassi,
Agassi, yeah, you get thicker, more muscular builds. Even like Sebastian Baez, more
yeah,
muscular builds in the shorter players. So I think there is some making up for lost
for
mass
sure.
there.
And like you said, like Agassi got really strong, but he also was super compact with the swings, right? So if you've got less space to accelerate the racket, you're going to need more force or more power to do that. So I think he got super strong to facilitate his compact swing. So yeah, it's complicated with the swings and the
Yeah.
rackets and like the physiology of the body. But yeah, it does help, but it's up to a point, and that's why you'll see, like you said, the longer levered, elastic guys tend to produce the biggest shots. Yeah,
Legs and core, though, everybody, right? That's good
yeah,
advice. Legs and core. All right, everybody, that is the show. My thank you to Hugh Clarke. Make sure to check out his newsletter, Thread of Order. I'll be back next week for full analysis of the Queens final and the Halle final. Should be good. The fields are very, very good. And look forward to talking to you guys then. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.